At the party, Grandma raised her glass, smiled at me, and said, "How's the house I bought you?" The words hit me like a punch. I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. The room went quiet, just the soft music still playing in the background. Every face turned toward me. My mother's smile slipped away. She looked pale, almost sick. "The what house?" I asked, my voice small but sharp. Grandma laughed lightly, thinking I was joking. "The one in Cedar Ridge, sweetheart. I hope you've settled in by now." I stared at her, confused. I still lived in my tiny apartment above the bakery where the pipes rattled at night and the heat barely worked. There was no house. My mother, Lydia, suddenly stood up and said too quickly, "Mom, you must be mixing things up. Avery doesn't have a house." Grandma blinked. "Of course she does. I bought it for her right after she graduated. Don't you remember?" Everyone stared at my mother. My stepfather, Ray, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My brother Caleb looked down at his plate like he wanted to disappear. I felt everyone's eyes on me, waiting for me to laugh, to say something. But my heart was pounding too hard for that. I turned to my mom. "What is she talking about?" She gave me that tight, fake smile she used whenever she was lying. "Honey, Grandma just gets confused sometimes. You know how she is." But Grandma wasn't confused. Her mind was clearer than anyone's in that room. She frowned. "I remember signing the papers. Lydia, you handled it for me. I sent you the money." The table went silent. Even the music seemed to fade. My mother opened her mouth, then shut it again. Ray reached over and squeezed her arm like he was warning her. I could feel my hands shaking. "Mom," she finally forced a laugh. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it must have fallen through. There was a deal we were looking at years ago, but it didn't work out." "That's what she means." Grandma looked hurt. "No, Lydia. I remember clearly. It was bought. I even saw the photos. The blue house with the porch. That was it for me. I couldn't sit there pretending everything was normal while the air felt thick with secrets. I excused myself and walked out to the backyard, needing to breathe. The night air was cold, the sound of laughter from inside muffled by the walls. My stomach twisted. "A house? Bought for me?" My mother knew something, and she'd just lied to my face. Through the window, I could see her whispering fiercely to Ray, his jaw tight, his eyes darting toward the door where I had gone. Grandma looked confused, and Caleb looked scared. I clenched my fists. Something was wrong. I didn't know what yet, but I was going to find out. Tonight, when the last guest left and the music stopped, I waited until Grandma was in the living room talking to one of her friends. Then I found my mom in the kitchen. She was standing by the sink, pretending to wash dishes, even though most of them were already clean. I stepped closer. "Mom, we need to talk about what Grandma said." She didn't look at me. "Avery, not now. She's been mixing things up lately. You know how she gets with her memory." "That's not true," I said quietly. "Grandma remembers everything. She still pays her own bills and drives herself to church every Sunday. She doesn't forget things like buying someone a house." Mom turned to face me, her lips pressed tight. "You're overthinking this. Grandma must have been talking about something else. Maybe she meant to buy you one, but it never happened." I shook my head. "She said it was already bought. She even mentioned photos. That doesn't sound like confusion." Her tone hardened. "Avery, don't make a big deal out of this. You'll upset her if you start digging into things that don't matter." Before I could answer, Ray walked in, still holding a drink. He looked at both of us, his eyes cold. "What's going on?" "Your daughter," Mom said, her voice sharp, "is trying to accuse me of something ridiculous. About some imaginary house." Ray gave me that look he always did when he wanted to shut me down. "Let it go, Avery. It's Grandma's birthday, not a courtroom. Don't ruin the evening over nonsense." I felt my face grow hot. "It's not nonsense if she thinks she bought me a house. I just want to understand why she believes that." Ray took a slow sip and said, "You always think everyone's hiding something from you. Maybe it's time you grew up." I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I swallowed them down. There was something ugly in his tone, like he was daring me to push further. Caleb walked in then, holding a plate of leftover cake. He looked between us, uncomfortable. "Everything okay?" Mom smiled too brightly. "Just your sister misunderstanding Grandma again." Caleb hesitated. His eyes flicked to me, then away. I remember something. A long time ago. There was talk about paperwork and something with a house. I was like 16. Mom snapped, "Caleb, stop talking. You don't know what you're saying." That was enough for me. My heart pounded in my chest. There it was, the small crack in their story. I walked to the door, grabbed my coat, and didn't look back. I'm going home, I said. Outside, the rain had started to fall, soft at first, then heavier as I reached my car. I sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting the engine. The windshield blurred with raindrops as I drove through the quiet streets, headlights reflecting off wet pavement. My hands were tight around the steering wheel. They had lied. I didn't know how or why yet, but I could feel it deep in my gut. For the first time, I wasn't sure who my family really was. The next morning, I woke up with the same question echoing in my head. The house. I couldn't shake it off. I knew I wouldn't get any answers from Mom or Ray, so I decided to talk to the only person I trusted, Grandma. I stopped by her house with coffee and muffins, pretending everything was normal. She looked happy to see me, her silver hair pinned up neatly like always. "What a nice surprise," she said, taking the coffee from my hands. We sat at her kitchen table, sunlight coming through the window. I tried to sound casual. "Grandma, about what you said last night, the house you mentioned. What house was that?" Her face lit up. "Oh, that one. The Blue Craftsman in Cedar Ridge. Did you go see it yet? I hope it's holding up well. It was such a beautiful home." I froze but forced a smile. "No, I haven't seen it in a while. Can you remind me what it looks like?" She stood up quickly, moving faster than most 75-year-olds I knew, and disappeared into the next room. When she came back, she carried a photo album. She flipped through the pages until she found a picture of a blue house with white trim, a big porch, and a maple tree in front. "There it is," she said proudly, tapping the picture. "I knew you'd love it. Your mom helped with the paperwork. She even cried when she signed the deed, said she was so happy for you." My stomach twisted. "You mean, Mom signed the papers?" "Of course," Grandma said, smiling. "She handled everything for me. I wired the money to her account, and she took care of the rest. I wanted to surprise you after college, but she said you were still getting settled, so we waited. You never mentioned it again, so I assumed you moved in later." I stared at the picture. The sky behind the house was bright blue, the porch swing painted white. It looked perfect. Too perfect. "Grandma," I said softly, "you paid for it all?" She looked confused by the question. "Yes, dear. It was a gift. You'd worked so hard. I wanted you to have a fresh start, a home of your own." I smiled weakly, kissed her cheek, and left soon after. The moment I got into my car, my hands started shaking. I drove to Cedar Ridge. It was only a 20-minute trip, but it felt much longer. The town was quiet, rows of tidy houses with trimmed lawns. I turned onto Maple Street and saw it, the same blue house from the photo. My heart raced. I parked by the curb and walked up the path. There were toys scattered in the yard, a small bike leaning against the porch. Someone lived there. I rang the doorbell. After a moment, a man opened the door. He looked to be in his mid-30s, friendly but cautious. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Hi," I said, trying to sound calm. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm looking for the owner of this house." He frowned. "That would be me. Derek Lane. I bought it from a couple, Lydia and Ray Mitchell, about 3 years ago." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My mother's name. My stepfather's. My mouth went dry. "You bought it from them?" He nodded. "Yes. They said it belonged to them. Is something wrong?" I couldn't answer. My pulse was thundering in my ears. I just mumbled something and turned away. As I walked back to my car, I could barely feel the ground under my feet. My mother hadn't just lied. She had stolen from me. I barely slept that night. My mind kept circling around the blue house, Derek's words, and Grandma's photo. I needed proof, something real, something on paper. So the next morning, I drove to the county records office downtown. The building was quiet, the smell of old files and coffee filling the air. At the front desk, a woman in glasses asked what I was looking for. I told her I needed property records for a house in Cedar Ridge. She typed for a while, then printed out a few pages. I sat down at one of the tables and started reading. There it was, my name, Avery Mitchell, owner. The date matched what Grandma had said almost 5 years ago. For a moment, my heart lifted. Grandma had really done it. The house had been mine. But then my eyes caught another line, a transfer of ownership 3 years later. From Avery Mitchell to Lydia and Raymond Mitchell. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but not quite. The letters were stiff, uneven. And next to it was the stamp, power of attorney. I felt the air leave my lungs. My mother had signed the papers as if she had legal control of my property. I had never given her that. Not once. I walked back to the desk and asked the clerk if I could see the documents in person. She nodded and brought out the file. My fingers trembled as I looked at the pages. There it was again, my name written in someone else's hand. The clerk frowned. "That signature doesn't match your driver's license," she said quietly. I swallowed hard. "No," I whispered. "It doesn't." I thanked her and left, but the world outside felt like it had tilted. My mother had forged my name. Driving home, I could barely keep my hands steady on the wheel. My chest hurt. Every breath felt heavy. And then I remembered the car accident. It was 4 years ago. I'd been hit at an intersection and ended up in the hospital for weeks. I was groggy on medication, signing insurance forms, hospital releases. Mom had handled all the bills and paperwork. She'd told me not to worry about anything, that she'd take care of it all. That must have been when she got my documents. My license, my ID, my signature. Everything she needed to steal the house. I pulled over on the side of the road and sat there with my forehead resting against the steering wheel. My stomach turned. It wasn't just about money or property. It was about trust. All my life, I believed my mom loved me unconditionally. She was the one who patched my scraped knees, who told me to never lie, who said family was everything. Now I saw it differently. Every memory felt tainted. Every kind word felt like part of a lie I hadn't noticed before. My own mother had stolen from me. Not just a house, but the feeling that I was safe with her. That kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt. It changes who you are. I drove straight to my parents' house, the papers from the county office still in my hand. I didn't call first or plan what I would say. My body moved before my mind could catch up. The moment I stepped inside, I found them in the kitchen, talking quietly over coffee. Mom looked up and smiled like nothing had happened. "Avery, honey, what a surprise." I dropped the folder on the table. "You forged my signature." Her smile faded. Ray's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone flat. I pulled the papers out and spread them across the table. "These are from the county office. The house Grandma bought, it was mine. You sold it. You used a fake signature and pretended to have power of attorney." Mom's face went pale, then red. "Where did you get these?" "It doesn't matter where. I know the truth." My voice shook, but I kept going. "You stole from me, Mom. From your own daughter." She sank into a chair, covering her mouth with her hand. For a second, she looked guilty. Then something inside her snapped. "Do you have any idea what I've done for you? How much I've given up?" I stared at her. "So that makes this okay?" Tears filled her eyes, but her voice grew louder. "I raised you alone after your father left. I worked 2 jobs. When Ray came along, we finally had a chance to breathe. You had everything. That house was never really yours. It was ours. I deserved it after all those years." Ray leaned back in his chair with a cold smirk. "You're being dramatic, Avery. Families share things. You should be grateful your mom looked out for you." My hands clenched into fists. "Grateful? For what?" "For stealing what wasn't yours." He shrugged. "You wouldn't have known if Grandma hadn't opened her mouth." That was it. My throat burned, and my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. "You two disgust me." Mom stood suddenly, shouting, "Don't you dare talk to me like that. You wouldn't last a week without me." I stepped back. "Watch me." I turned and walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. The door slammed behind me, and I didn't look back. Driving away, I could still hear her voice in my head, angry, defensive, twisting everything to make herself the victim. The betrayal felt deeper than ever. But under all the pain, a quiet fire started to build. I wasn't going to yell or beg. I wanted them to feel what I felt, that cold emptiness when the truth finally catches up. That evening, I visited Grandma. She was sitting on the porch, knitting in the soft light. She smiled when she saw me and patted the seat beside her. I didn't tell her what I'd found. She didn't need that pain. Before I left, she took my hand and said gently, "Sweetheart, kindness is a choice, not a weakness." I smiled back, but deep down I knew I wasn't done. After that night, I stopped crying. The anger was still there, but it wasn't wild anymore. It was quiet, steady, like a slow-burning fire I could control. I knew yelling at them again wouldn't change anything. They would lie and twist the truth until I was the villain. So instead, I started planning. I worked at a bank in the loans department. I'd spent years studying numbers, reports, and small print that most people ignored. That job had always felt dull before, but now I saw how useful it could be. I didn't need to break any laws. I just needed to pay attention. Ray owned a small contracting business. I knew that much. He bragged about it at every family gathering, pretending he was successful. But when I started looking closer, the picture didn't fit. His name came up in public tax records. There were late payments, small liens, and unpaid suppliers. Nothing illegal yet, but messy enough to cause him problems if anyone started asking questions. At work, I spent my breaks looking through public databases and business listings. Ray had 2 accounts under different company names. One was nearly empty, the other had strange transactions that didn't match his reported income. It looked like he was moving money to hide it from the IRS or from creditors. I saved what I found, careful not to cross any lines. Everything I used was public. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but the more I discovered, the calmer I felt. Every truth I uncovered made the anger inside me a little quieter. A few weeks later, I decided to visit someone who used to work for Ray, a man named Nolan Price. He'd come into the bank before to apply for a loan, and I remembered him mentioning Ray's company. I called him, told him I wanted to talk about a personal matter. We met at a small diner outside town. Nolan was a big man with tired eyes and paint stains on his hands. When I brought up Ray's name, his face tightened. "Let me guess," he said, setting down his coffee. "He owes you money too?" "Something like that," I said carefully. He told me how Ray had underpaid his workers, promised bonuses that never came, and fired people just before paychecks were due. "He thinks he's smarter than everyone," Nolan said. "Always cutting corners, always lying." I listened, taking notes. Nolan even showed me old pay slips and text messages as proof. It wasn't just gossip, it was a pattern. When we finished, Nolan leaned forward. "Why are you digging into him?" I looked out the window, then back at him. "Because it's time someone did." Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore, begging for truth. I was patient, focused, and determined. I didn't want to destroy them in anger. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to lose everything slowly, piece by piece, just like they had done to me. It took me a few more weeks to gather everything. Every night after work, I sat at my kitchen table, reading documents, checking dates, and making copies. I had Grandma's original records of the house, including the notarized letter she'd kept with her things. Her handwriting was careful, her signature perfect. It was all the proof anyone would ever need. I didn't want to go to the police directly. I wanted it done the right way, quietly, through the proper channels. So I sent everything, copies of the deed, the forged signature, Grandma's records, to the state attorney's office. I didn't sign my name. I just wrote that I believed a property had been illegally transferred using a false power of attorney. Then I mailed it and waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Weeks went by with no word. I went to work, came home, and acted like nothing had changed. But inside, I was alert, watching, waiting for something to happen. Then it did. One evening, I got a call from Caleb. His voice sounded shaky. "Avery, have you talked to Mom or Ray lately?" "No," I said slowly. "Why?" "They've been getting letters from the state attorney's office. Ray's freaking out. He thinks someone's accusing them of fraud or something." I stayed silent. Caleb kept talking, trying to make sense of it. "Mom's been crying all week. She keeps saying there's been some mistake. Ray's blaming her for everything. He's talking about lawyers." I could almost picture it. Ray pacing, angry and nervous, Mom trying to calm him down. The image didn't bring me joy exactly, but it gave me peace. Caleb hesitated before speaking again. "You know something about this, don't you?" I didn't answer right away. "Caleb," I said softly, "you should stay out of it. None of this is your fault." He sighed. "I just don't understand why she'd do something like that. To you, of all people." Neither did I. But understanding wasn't what I wanted anymore. I just wanted accountability. A few days later, Mom started calling me. First once, then twice, then every day. I didn't pick up. She sent messages. "We need to talk. Please, Avery. Let's fix this." I deleted them all. Ray tried too, but his tone was different. His messages were short and threatening. "You think you can ruin us? You have no idea what you've started." I ignored him as well. They were finally feeling what I had felt, powerless. Meanwhile, Grandma began noticing the tension. She called me one afternoon, her voice soft and worried. "Sweetheart, your mother's been acting strange lately. Is something wrong?" I forced a calm tone. "No, Grandma. Nothing you need to worry about." She paused. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said gently. "Everything's going to be fine." After I hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. The storm had started, and there was no stopping it now. I didn't feel proud or happy, but I felt certain. Justice was finally moving, slowly, quietly, just the way I wanted. It all started falling apart faster than I expected. Within a month, everything around my mother and Ray began to crumble. Their accounts were frozen, their business under review, and Ray's name was suddenly all over the local court filings. I didn't need anyone to tell me what was happening. I could see it in the small signs. Their company website went offline, the trucks from Ray's business stopped showing up around town, and even Caleb stopped answering messages for a while. Then, one afternoon, I got a call I hadn't prepared for. Grandma. Her voice was shaky and tired. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "I just got a letter from some lawyer's office. It's about the house. It says there's an investigation. What's going on?" My heart sank. The letter must have been sent to her as part of the original transfer. I hadn't wanted her to find out like this. "Grandma, I'm so sorry," I said quietly. She didn't sound angry. "Just broken." "Lydia stole from you?" she whispered. "From her own child?" There was nothing I could say. The silence between us said everything. "I wanted to give you a home," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Not a reason to hate your own blood." That sentence hit me harder than anything else had. I drove straight to her house. When I got there, she was sitting in her favorite chair, clutching that same photo album. Tears were running down her cheeks. I knelt beside her and took her hand. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," I said. She shook her head. "I'm not angry at you, sweetheart. You did what you had to do. I'm just so disappointed in her." We sat together for a long time, not saying much. I felt guilty for hurting her, but part of me also felt a grim satisfaction. My mother was finally being held accountable. She couldn't lie her way out of this. Ray didn't handle it well. A few days later, Caleb told me he had disappeared. No one knew where he went. His phone was off, his truck gone. Lydia was left alone to deal with the mess. She called me over and over again. When I finally answered, her voice was sharp and bitter. "You did this," she said. "You ruined our family. Are you proud of yourself? You're vindictive, Avery. You always were." I let her talk. I didn't argue or try to defend myself. When she finally stopped, I said quietly, "You ruined it yourself when you lied." Then I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Grandma's words, about how she never meant for any of this pain. I looked around my small apartment and felt both empty and relieved. My revenge had worked, but it didn't feel clean. It didn't feel like victory. It just felt like the truth, raw, heavy, and unchangeable. Still, I couldn't take it back. I wouldn't apologize. They had taken everything from me once. This time, it was theirs to lose. The court hearings started in early spring. I sat in the back of the courtroom most days, trying to keep my face blank while the lawyers spoke. My mother sat across the room at the defense table, her shoulders hunched, her hair pulled back too tightly. Ray was beside her, staring straight ahead, his expression hard. They both looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of their choices had finally caught up to them. The charges were serious. Lydia for forgery and theft. Ray for fraud and tax evasion. The evidence was clear. Every document, every signature, every lie they thought no one would notice. The papers Grandma had saved turned out to be the strongest proof. When Grandma took the stand, the whole room went quiet. She looked fragile but steady, her voice trembling only once when she said, "I gave that house to my granddaughter. It was hers. I trusted my daughter to handle the details. I never imagined she would betray both of us." I felt tears in my eyes, but I held them back. Watching Grandma speak was painful, but I knew she was stronger than she looked. She met my eyes once before stepping down, and I gave her a small nod. Ray's lawyer tried to blame everything on Lydia, claiming he had no idea what she'd done. But when the investigators showed the records from his company, the hidden accounts, the false reports, his lies fell apart just as fast as hers. Lydia broke down near the end. She cried through most of her testimony, saying she never meant to hurt anyone, that she just wanted what was fair. But no one in that courtroom believed her anymore. Even Caleb, sitting beside me, didn't move to comfort her. When the judge read the verdict, there was no relief, only silence. Lydia was found guilty. Ray too. Both faced sentences that would follow them for years. I didn't cheer or cry. I just sat there, feeling hollow. Afterward, Caleb walked out with me. He didn't say much, just shook his head. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. "I'm done with them." Then he hugged me and left. I stayed behind for a moment, looking back through the glass at the courtroom. The same room where everything had fallen apart was now the place where it finally ended. but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like standing in the ruins of something that used to be home. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the county. The title deed had been restored in my name. The house in Cedar Ridge was officially mine again. I held the paper in my hands for a long time. It should have made me happy, but all I felt was tired. I had the house back, but the family that once filled my life with noise and laughter was gone. What I'd won could never replace what was lost. The day I finally went to see the house, the sky was clear and bright. I drove with the windows down, letting the warm air move through the car. The road to Cedar Ridge felt different this time. Not like a place full of secrets, but a road that led to something finished. The house stood just as Grandma's photo had shown it. The blue paint had faded a little, and the porch steps creaked when I walked up. A for sale sign leaned against the railing, left over from when the state reclaimed it. The key in my hand felt heavy, like it carried the weight of everything that had happened. When I opened the door, the smell of dust and old wood filled the air. Sunlight streamed through the windows, touching every corner of the empty rooms. It was quiet, not the lonely kind of quiet, but peaceful, like the house had been waiting. I walked slowly through each room. The kitchen had white cabinets, chipped around the edges. The living room had a fireplace and a spot where a couch might have sat. Upstairs, there were 2 small bedrooms with light blue walls and marks on the floor where furniture once stood. I tried to picture my life here. Mornings with coffee on the porch, laughter echoing in the halls, maybe even Grandma visiting for Sunday dinners. But those moments never happened. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, realizing that I wasn't here to dream about what could have been. I was here to face what was real. This house was mine now, not because someone gave it to me, but because I fought for it. It didn't erase the pain, and it didn't bring my family back. But it was something honest, something that no one could take away again. A few days later, Grandma came by. I met her at the front door and helped her up the steps. She looked around slowly, her eyes soft and full of sadness. "It's even prettier than I remembered," she said quietly. We walked through the rooms together, her hand resting lightly on my arm. When we reached the living room, she pulled a small framed photo from her purse. A picture of me as a little girl, sitting on her porch steps with ice cream on my face. She smiled and set it gently on the fireplace mantel. "This belongs here," she said. I didn't trust my voice enough to answer. We stood there for a while, sunlight spilling across the floor, neither of us saying anything more. After she left, I sat alone on the porch. The breeze moved through the trees, and for the first time in a long time, I felt still. Everything that had happened, the lies, the loss, the anger, had led me here. That day, I didn't just walk into a house. I walked into the truth, ugly, heavy, but mine.